Saddle up your horses.
Pitter patter, let's get at her. It is another episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast, and it is draft week, ladies and gentlemen. It took quite a bit, as far as all the speculation, all the talking. But gents, we are finally here at draft week, and I tell you, it feels good to kind of finally tie a bow on something that can take a year-long process, maybe in a few years process, as far as kind of talking about numerous different prospects, year in and year out. And what better person to continue to tie a bow off of all of this than a guy who was part of the Let's Talk Broncos crew, Frankie. He's been a part of, obviously, this entire process, so it's good to have him back. And we are excited to tie a bow on all of this with a mock draft of picks 1 to 31. Frankie, how you doing, my man?
Doing good. Like you said, it's been a long time coming. My final notes are being put in on my players. I've wrapped up most of the 2023 film until the Broncos make their picks, and I look back at a few guys. If there's a player I don't recognize their name, I'll probably go back and look. But the draft process is coming to the close for this season. I'll probably maybe take a second or two to recollect my thoughts on the football world, and then I'm excited to dive back into it once this Broncos training camp and true offseason period gets underway, when we got some new faces in here. So I'm doing pretty good, man. I'm looking forward to it. Bucs game tonight, hoping that they can pull it back and maybe they don't lose that series, but it's looking like they probably will.
Talk about a disappointment. It's been a little bit of a disappointment, for sure. And it's something I'm sure, Frankie doesn't certainly want to talk about, because it's been such a disappointing series. But the entire cast of characters, if you will, is also here. Over on the top right is Brandon Miller, and on the bottom left is Matty Moles. So thank you, both of y'all, for hopping in with us. Brandon, we'll start with you. You doing well?
Yeah, man, the draft has snuck up on me this year. Like, normally I'm much more excited for it. And I mean, obviously the Broncos don't have an even remotely high pick, so that's probably why I just kind of like, I haven't really, it's not that I don't care about it. It just kind of like, I don't have the same urgency that I have had pretty much every other year. Or maybe not urgency, but just like, I'm normally super hyped for it. I'm like, holy shit, it's April. Like, I literally can't, like, I'm normally counting down the days like 4 weeks ago at this point. I'm counting down the days. And this year's just kind of been like, oh yeah, that's happening tomorrow.
Maddie, how are you doing, my man? Obviously, the NBA has issued their awards, and I'm sure that you are all peachy with some of the awards that have been handed out. But all in all, I'm sure you're doing pretty well, Maddie.
Coach of the year, most improved player, rookie of the year, all came in second. But SGA should be first team All NBA. From everything I'm hearing, that's what the tally is going to be at the guard position. So I'm okay. I'd rather he got first team All NBA than most improved player. Props up to Lauri Markkanen. Deserved it. Whatever. Props up to Paolo. Deserved it. Obviously, with what the Kings have done, Mike Brown deserves it too. So all deserving winners. I'm a little salty that our guys didn't get fully recognized, but big things popping in Thunder Nation. So that's dope. Got the NBA draft and the NBA draft lottery to worry about coming up soon. But we got to get over this bear known as the NFL draft first.
Oh, yeah.
The eve of it really doesn't feel like it's here, though. It's a weird year, just all around, kind of. Maybe I'm not as associated with it because the Broncos don't like to draft first-round picks, apparently. I've forgotten I forgot what that feels like a little bit. So, we traded 3 first-round picks over the last 2 seasons. So, whatever. Pretty dope to even get here and be talking football. The last chance we'll really have to talk about football until we get into like mini camp and all that stuff starting in July. So Pretty excited, fellas. Let's get into this thing.
Welcome in, Ray. We are glad to have you. It is another mock draft special. So, Ray, if you tuned into the one for Sports Nonsense and Whiskey, it probably will not be going 2.5 hours. I can probably assuredly, tell you that. So this one will be, I would say, cut in half. But thank you so much for hopping in with us. I'm going to ask you, Frankie, are you like one of those people? Because I know a friend of the show, Lance Anderson, shared a Google Doc of like his big board of players. Are you one of the people that like that does like the nitty gritty like top 400 players? That's an exaggeration, but like 400 players of like players that you are ranked basically from top to bottom.
So I don't know. I don't think I've done the full, putting it into the Excel document, really organizing it all top to bottom. I definitely haven't reached that extent of it, but I'd say like probably throughout the year, it's definitely over like 200 players that I've watched at least a game or two of, at least 2 or 3 of. So definitely close, but no, I'm not at Lance's point where I'm putting together the full big board. I'm releasing it all. I've got my positions ranked out. If you ask me, I could probably think of it on the spot, but I haven't gotten to organize my thoughts quite that well yet. But hopefully, sometime in the near future.
Well, it is an exciting time because as we said, it is the NFL draft, and we are going to do a pick 'em, if you will. Every single person that you guys see in this stream was assigned teams and multiple different teams. So we will be putting our general manager hats on. Some of us were acting like Jim Irsay, some of us like Howie Roseman, and we put our general manager hats on and made selections for those respective teams. And we are certainly excited to make those selections for you right here tonight on the live stream of the Manely Broncos podcast. So, gentlemen, should we start our engines? Should we get this thing?
I'm ready. Let's dive in.
All right. So we are going to start things off with the ever so simplistic, should we say, Pro Football Network mock draft simulator. Don't worry, all things are selected. All right. So now that would mean that the Carolina Panthers are on the clock, Frankie, and you are in the general manager chair for the Panthers.
Yeah.
They've made so many different shocking moves, should we say, of hiring Frank Reich in the offseason. They also made an earth-shattering move of trading up to 1 and basically putting to bed that they are going to be interested in a quarterback. The question has just been who. So, Frankie, you're on the clock as the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah. So when you make a move up to number 1 overall, I think you got to take the biggest swing. You want to get a guy that has the best potential to become a top 5 quarterback. When I look at this class, I think that guy is Anthony Richardson. So he is going to be my pick. As shocking as that might be to a lot of people, kind of miscategorized, I think, is a bit of a project, but isn't as big, I think, as a lot of people think. This isn't going to be the same as like Malik Willis was last year. This is a guy that has some decent mechanics already under his belt, has one of the bigger arms in the class, the freakiest athlete at quarterback we've seen ever. And is just like genuinely, if you get this guy in the right system, which I believe Frank Reich will put in place, I believe Frank Reich is one of the true quarterback gurus we have in the NFL. I think he's the guy that's going to be able to help Anthony Richardson get to that top 10 peak. And that's the pick I'd make if I was out there in Carolina. I know the idea of having a CJ Stroud or Bryce Young can be appealing, but Bryce Young, the frame just scares me a little bit too much to take him at number 1 overall. CJ Stroud, I think you could aim a little bit higher. I think, when you look at him, he's kind of a little bit more of a clone of like a little bit of like a Jared Goff coming out, which isn't the worst thing in the world. But I think when you make a big move up to 1, you should be trying to get the best quarterback you can. And I think that could be Anthony Richardson. So that's my choice.
That means that the pick is that means the pick is in. And as Frankie just alluded to, it is Anthony Richardson from Florida. The Carolina Panthers go big. They win big, and therefore they go out and get Anthony Richardson And that means that does that possibly put to bed, Brandon, the idea that maybe the Houston Texans will actually, and I mean smartly, go for a quarterback here with the Houston Texans, or are we looking at another Houston we have a problem situation?
I mean, I'm just gonna steal exactly what Frankie just said, and that when you're in this position, you have to go for the best quarterback that you can. And I actually saw some reports coming out as early as like within the last 5 hours that even though that the Texans met with Bryce Young, that it was a waste of time because there was no way he was going to be there at 2. Well, now he's there at 2, and I'm going to take him because even though he's going to have that concern of like, oh, he's too small, he's the durability is going to be a factor. I mean, one, you put this guy in an NFL weight room. I'm not saying that they're magic compared to like college weight rooms, to the same weight rooms, right? But I know people like have that concern of people say all the time you put someone in an NFL weight room. It's not that. It's the constant nutrition that they're going to be getting at the pro level. They're going to have people all the time telling them eat like this, train like this. I think he can put on some mass, but I mean, if you're talking about one of the best quarterbacks in this class, I mean, Bryce Young is arguably the best quarterback, and DeMeco Ryans wants someone. When you also have a new head coach, you want to give that head coach the best chance possible to succeed. And DeMeco Ryans, I think, would be elated to have someone like Bryce Young. Nothing against, Davis the Neck Mills. I mean, Davis Mills has been impressive for them, to be honest, based on maybe what you expected him to kind of be, which he's surpassed those expectations in pretty much any way you can imagine. But you get a guy like Bryce Young who has the ability to extend the play. He's a smart guy. He could make those reads that actually were required of him in Alabama. It wasn't just like he's throwing wide open receivers. He had to like actually manipulate the field with his eyes, and he showed the ability to do that. And I think he's a slam dunk pick at number 2.
That means that the pick is in for the Houston Texans, and it is Bryce Young. You know, Bryce Young. I feel like he's been nitpicked a little bit, right? He's been kind of nitpicked a little bit with his size and everything. But you turn the tape on, he's like a shorter version of a Patrick Mahomes. Really, I feel like one of the best comparisons I kind of ever heard was kind of cross sports, if you will. And it was basically saying that he's basically Steph Curry on the football field. And I feel like, with the way that he is, with his size and height, it feels like such an apropos comparison for a guy like Bryce Young, because he's such a fun watch on the football field. So I think it's going to be interesting. And this may or may not happen, because obviously there's so much speculation that the Houston Texans are going to Mario Williams this thing again and, go out and get Tyree Wilson or, maybe the best defensive prospect that's out there.
Hey, I mean, maybe they love Davis Mills. I mean,
you never know.
He's certainly surprised, but I think you got to go with the best quarterback you can.
For all the listeners out there, take a shot, because apropos was said by Cam, and he says it at least once every episode. So
that's actually not
everyone.
That's actually not true. I the last few times I've actually not said apropos. So, all right.
I think we'll have to check at the tape on that. I don't know if you can say that for certain. You don't know. You have no clue.
Oh, this is true. All right. So
if I had known about this, I would have literally been writing down every time you said apropos in our non-recorded meetings just to have the receipts.
All right. So the Arizona Cardinals are on the clock, and there are some speculation. Do the Arizona Cardinals actually stay here? And who are some of the teams that go in and leapfrog and these other teams and get into the Arizona Cardinals slot? There's a few teams. Well, as a Broncos fan, I will say it pains me, to propose certainly a should I say a trade like this, and hopefully I can scroll down and get the AFC West. on here, that would be certainly helpful.
Technical difficulties. Does it not let you go down?
I guess not. Oh, there we go. Unless I do like an expand screen.
Yeah, just like zoom out a bunch.
All right,
There you
so
go.
unfortunately, gentlemen, the Las Vegas Raiders are leapfrogging everybody, and they are going to be trading Josh Jacobs, a 7th pick, and a first next year, and a second next year. In total Josh McDaniels fashion of trading away a player and then, getting the quarterback that he wants. And therefore, we are looking at a situation where Josh McDaniels has basically completely done his thing again. He's decided to get weird. He's decided to get freaky. He's decided to also not take the quarterback that probably people think he would take. So, I mean, he's got Jimmy Garoppolo, right? So, like, ideally, you would think, oh, he might tend to go to the CJ Stroud parts of the world. Well, that's not going to happen. So he goes out and he ends up taking the guy who just so happens to be maybe the weirdest cat of the entire, NFL draft the last few years. He eats banana peels whole. And not only that, he even puts mayonnaise in his coffee, and that will be Will Levis of, of the Kentucky Wildcats. So, certainly one that it was definitely unexpected, should I say? But yeah, so I'm definitely, yeah, I don't know. It's just, yeah.
Makes sense to me. It's such a McDaniels
It's
selection.
a McDaniels pick.
Playing in the
That's
pro
what
style.
that reaction
And,
was. Good.
When you talk about it, like having a big, strong quarterback that can stand pretty strong in the pocket, I think it matches up pretty well with Devontae Adams. It's one of those kind of boomer bust selections. A little shocking to see CJ Stroud slip down the board, but with all the recent stuff we're hearing about the possible, maybe isn't doing the best in a lot of these interviews and a lot of these other testing things that are being introduced recently, maybe we do see him making a little bit of a slip to 4. So I think it's completely possible.
I think I saw
Lower.
someone had him slip to like 17 or something ridiculous, which like blew my mind. Like I'm convinced it's probably not going to happen. But I mean, this is literally the most. If you're going to tell me, give me a list of the most possible McDaniels picks, this would be number 1 on the list.
Yeah. And in all fairness, I mean, I didn't think there was a single chance Justin Fields fell a couple of years ago. He ended up slipping all the way down to 11. So maybe we see something similar here or maybe it was 9, but maybe we see something similar here happen with CJ Stroud.
I mean, I don't have him falling further than one more pick, but it could happen. You never know.
Yeah. So that puts the Indianapolis Colts on the clock. And Maddie, I think that there was some talk that maybe they wanted to go with maybe a Will Levis. But does this certainly maybe change the plans and the idea maybe how they wanted to go maybe with this pick? Oh, looks like we maybe lost Maddie for a little bit. But yeah,
I think the Colts would be elated to have CJ Stroud there.
I'm back in. Sorry, I was just on the phone with CJ Stroud's agent. I had to look it up real quick. I didn't think I was going to have the opportunity to make that phone call. So CJ Stroud is going to be a Colt.
Was it a situation where you're just like, oh, holy shit. Number 3 pick was Will Levis instead of CJ Stroud.
He was shaking, handing the draft card in, just like
all my intel said it was going to be Levis, and I was ready to fall on that sword here at 4. But the Raiders going to Raider, and they took the guy a little higher than they should have. I didn't think that he was going to be here. So Stroud, I mean, what can you say about the guy that hasn't really already been said? You know, his best comparable maybe is somebody who was tied to Ohio State before in Joe Burrow. And I think he's going to be able to unlock quite a bit in that offense. Man, what a great talent. Imagine going from the corpse of Phillip Rivers and Matt Ryan to CJ Stroud and
James
what he's going
Steichen
to be able to,
man.
what he's going to be able to offer you. So Pat McAfee's going to be losing his damn mind. It's going to be really fun television. So CJ Stroud, easy pick. Let's go.
I mean, let's not forget the Raiders took Cleveland Farrell at 4 in 2019, so you never know.
Yeah.
Do you think they meant to take Colin Farrell and just made a mistake, or
possibly? So then at 5, I mean, if we're talking about how the Colts have to be super excited about their pick, I think if the Seahawks are able to watch Will Anderson drop right into their lap with the 5th pick that isn't even theirs, they would be absolutely ecstatic. You look at this roster, it's already so full of young pieces on both sides of the ball. They have a little bit of a weakness at that edge position. I think Uchenna was a really nice piece for them last year, but I think they could definitely use a little bit more of a superstar. You throw Will Anderson on that defense, you get him playing underneath Pete Carroll and that entire defensive system and staff. I think he's going to become a superstar like he already looks like he's going to be, and I think that's a home run selection. And if you're a Broncos fan like we all are, you are quite unhappy watching the Seahawks make that pick because, oh my goodness, Will Anderson could be on this football team and not Russell Wilson at a $200 million hit over the next 6 years. I'm just letting you know it's entirely possible.
Put that evil on me. I know it's going to happen. No,
it's going to happen.
It's already
terrible. Or they're going to get Jalen Carter, and I believe in their coaching staff and the players that they've brought in to be like, you know, I'm not going to pretend I know as much about the off-the-field concerns as people around the situation, but I believe in the Seahawks coaching staff and the people they've brought in to be a positive influence on a player that might need some in the earlier stages of his career. So I think either way, they're getting a home run player there.
I'm going to put all of my biased hate that has anything to do with Russell Wilson into a box and stash it far away in the back recesses of my mind, which is incredibly mentally unhealthy. And I'm going to say that I'm actually really excited to see what the Seahawks are going to be doing here in the next couple of years because we something.
They're a fun team. It sucks. But
I dragged the box back up, but it's as much as me as a Denver fan would hate that. That would be incredible. Like, what a team! This team is going to be
meant to play it earlier, but that means that the selection, and that means that Will Anderson is going to the Seattle Seahawks. You know, especially in a year where they signed Draymond Jones, right? They signed Draymond Jones in the offseason. This is just a fun defensive line now, man. I mean, you add Will Anderson to that. That's a really scary. It's a really scary unit for that defensive line. That puts the Detroit Lions on the clock, and there's been so much speculation, of what they're going to do, certainly. But the intrigue is certainly there, Brandon. Potentially maybe the pick of the litter, maybe as far as the quarterback position.
So you want to talk about teams that like they're going some places. The Lions I love this team. This team is so fun to watch. I literally don't think I watched a single Lions game last season where I wasn't actually enjoying myself. And I can't believe I just said that sentence. But this team is super fun to watch and they're building something. And that defense specifically can get scary. I actually was lucky enough to have both Lions picks this go around, spoiler alert. And I'm really, really excited for this. So going into this pick, I would say kind of the top two needs that the Lions have would be along the defensive line, specifically the interior, and then at corner. I thought about Jalen Carter here. My biggest reason that I'm leaning away from Jalen Carter is obviously he's an incredibly talented player. He's a top 10 prospect in this class. He could even potentially be better than his. First of all, how could these guys have all been teammates? Trayvon Walker, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter. How is that legal? But anyway, he could literally surpass both of those guys. This guy is incredibly talented. His biggest red flag and concern, aside from he did have a minor injury last year, but it wasn't crazy, is his off the field concerns. And I actually don't have a ton of insane detail on exactly what that is, but there's some red flags kind of going around that he's just not what you're looking for off the field. And I don't know exactly what that means. I think he was arrested last month for reckless driving and racing. So, I mean, it kind of sounds like, typical maybe college kid just making not the best choices. I think he had another like arrest. No, he was cited for speeding. I don't know. He's had several off the field issues and run-ins with law enforcement. So it just doesn't really seem like a Dan Campbell pick. Who does seem like a Dan Campbell pick, though, and their other area of need at corner after trading Jeff Okudah to the Falcons is cornerback. And I'm talking about Devin Witherspoon from Illinois. First of all, Illinois is a ridiculous defense, but Devin Witherspoon, and this is kind of just a thing now. He's sort of just been touted as the perfect Dan Campbell pick. He's super smart. He's super aggressive. He's tough. He's a good guy off the field. He's a solid, just human being. And he's a great corner. He can, you can make a case that he's the best corner in the class. I mean, I had a tough time choosing between him and Christian Gonzalez. I think Christian Gonzalez might be better, but Devin Witherspoon, just in terms of the culture fit, I think that's a slam dunk pick for them. They have a huge need there after Jeff Okudah. And I mean, they might be a little gun shy after taking Jeff super high and having him be a little bit of a bust, but Devin Witherspoon, Lions at 6 screams Dan Campbell.
So the pick is in, Brandon? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
The pick is in. Hey, you're the ones not hitting the thing in time. It's not my fault.
So that means that Devin Witherspoon is headed to the Detroit area, putting the Arizona Cardinals, who did the flip-flop with the Vegas Raiders, where the Raiders took Will Levis in ensure Josh McDaniels fashion of not just trading Josh Jacobs, but also acquiring the quarterback that no one saw coming, being Will Levis. So that puts the Cardinals back on the clock. A lot of speculation of where they certainly want to go. They easily could have stayed at 3 and taken Will Anderson, but instead they kind of gambled a little bit by jumping back just a few slots, and they were able to have it pay off, if you will. And so the Jalen Carter slide is done. So that means that the Jalen Carter slide is done. He is headed to the Arizona Cardinals, where he will bolster the just overall with basically just that entire defensive front. With the Arizona Cardinals, they need help everywhere. They need just absolutely some help everywhere, and it's going to add, I think, a lot of some intrigue, of maybe now what the Atlanta Falcons are going to do, with being now on the clock, because some people think maybe they go, maybe on the offensive side of the ball, but where are the Atlanta Falcons going?
Well, real quick, that pick by Arizona is good because all the issues they're having with Budda Baker on the back end, you're thinking, okay, what's the one way to maybe mitigate that if they have to move on from him? Well, let's bolster our front 7, maybe get after people, disrupt the line, disrupt timing, all of those things, especially with the lack of experience there in that division, seemingly. Again, we don't know what the Niners situation's gonna be like. We don't know if Stafford's gonna be able to hold up. And then certainly we think Geno Smith is going to be their guy moving forward. But again, just 1 year of production. Got to see it happen again. There is potential for them to do some damage. I think that's a great fit for them. The other guy potentially would be the offensive tackle, Paris Johnson there for them. But I think that's solid. Getting into Atlanta, a lot of other needs that they have. Cornerback, certainly. They could add some splash with Bijan Robinson, who's still on the board, potentially the number 2 overall player. But I'm going to go to some other team in the Big 12 that plays football in Texas, and that's going to be Tyree Wilson, the edge out of Texas Tech. Fits a need for them. He's not a super explosive edge rusher. Huge guy, 6'6", 275 pounds. Really good at the point of attack and sealing the edge on running plays. And then you can kick him inside. A lot of bull rush and just physical strength to be able to take on guards and potentially centers and getting after it and the rushing the quarterback game. Really solid pick for them. Their defense, they're just going to continue to add guys to it. Ezekiel Ansah or Chandler Jones are 2 player comps for them. And if you told me that, hey, at 8, you could add either one of those guys to that defense, that's a slam dunk, even with the splashier Bijan sitting there. So edge, Tyree Wilson, Texas Tech, formerly of Texas A&M, is the pick, redshirt senior for the Atlanta Falcons.
All
All right, so that means Tyree Wilson is headed to Atlanta, and the Bears are on the clock. And by the way, just real quick, this is like best case scenario I would say for Atlanta, because like if Tyree Wilson is like available here, they're like streaking to the podium. Go ahead, Frankie.
Yeah. So as far as for the Bears go, you got to figure out what you're doing with Justin Fields. Everyone thinks the best way to do that is maybe get yourself an elite top end receiver, maybe an elite tight end tackle. I think at this point, it's becoming a little bit of football is getting a little bit more positionless every single year. Get yourself the best offensive player on the board. Bijan Robinson fits that perfectly. Oof. He's going to be able to do so much for them. That offense, when you have Bijan, Justin Fields, DJ Moore playing all together, it's going to be really tough to block. I like a lot of the additions that they made along the interior of their offensive line. I know there's maybe some people that are like, oh, they should be going someone like Paris Johnson to really secure that left tackle spot. I'm not terribly worried about Braxton Jones. I still think that they have the ability, if they want to add a guy a little bit later. But I think when you talk about the best addition right now to help this team figure out what they have in Justin Fields, there's no one better than adding a weapon like Bijan Robinson. So that's my pick.
All right.
RPO game going to go insane.
Oh, yeah. Can you imagine? Like, it's going to be disgusting.
What do you do as an edge? Like,
crying.
You stand there and you're like, I guess I take up a little space. I don't know.
And the shifting things you can do with the DJ Moore type of prospect too, it's ridiculous. I think that offense can get so fun so quick. You see Getsy get to start making it happen. It'd be awesome.
Well, the thing that makes this so fun is like the team that's next on the clock being the Philadelphia Eagles. It's the same scary comparison that people were talking about the Philadelphia Eagles. It's like, well, Jalen Hurts and Bijan Robinson, that's just an insane combination. Well, what's to say that Justin Fields and Bijan Robinson, it is not that same idea, So I think it's certainly one that, it will bear watching for sure. And let's not forget too, they lost David Montgomery in free agency to the Detroit Lions. So it's certainly possible they can rely on Khalil Herbert for sure. But I wouldn't, put them past, even going out and getting a Bijan Robinson at 9. So Caleb from Sports Nonsense and Whiskey chimes in, and he says he's loving it so far. He said, we'd love to see the Raiders screw themselves so bad with that pick.
If the Raiders do this to themselves, this is as good as the Broncos having a first-round pick. That is my first-round pick. Broncos
it's also,
is the Raiders doing something stupid.
It also feels pretty Raider-esque, I should say, right?
Now, I'll say this, and I don't want to sound too Raiders optimistic, but I don't want to get too ahead of myself and being like, man, another team in the AFC West drafting one of these young, possibly very good franchise quarterbacks while Denver's staring down the barrel of one of the only 30-plus-year-old starters in the league at one of the highest cap hits in the NFL. Yes, I'd be a little happy because I don't think Will Levis is great, but I don't know, man. It's so hard for me to look at anything that these other teams do in the AFC West and really throw stones because, I don't know, man. I don't know. It's tough. It's tough
the main reason I would be excited is because they didn't take CJ Stroud. If they took CJ Stroud, I'm in tears.
No, that's fair.
That's what this comes down to. But no, I mean, I don't disagree with you. Like,
No, you're right.
it's real bad. Okay, I am Howie Roseman, and I am upset because I wanted Bijan Robinson. I wanted Bijan Robinson so bad. I am incredibly upset that the Bears just stole him from me. I lost my leading running back, Miles Sanders, in the offseason. I need a running back to pair with my running quarterback, and Bijan was going to be my guy. But instead, I have to pivot a little bit. And you know what?
Pivot.
I'm not unhappy about this because Paris Johnson has fallen into my lap at 10. And the Eagles, and I've talked about this before, actually, the Eagles have kind of been known as having like a very deep offensive line. And the reason they have such a deep offensive line is because they invest in the position and they invest highly in the position. And Paris Johnson is arguably the best tackle in this class. Comes in as a rookie in Philadelphia with Jeff Stoutland as our offensive line coach, who is arguably the best offensive line coach in the league, or by far at least one of the best ever. And he can, as a rookie, give Cam Jurgens at right guard a little bit of a nudge and some competition. And long term, Lane Johnson's 32. You got to kind of plan for what you're going to be doing after him. And Paris Johnson, he can come in, make a little bit of an impact as a rookie this year, maybe, or let him sit for this year and plug him in maybe next year or the year after that and kind of see what happens with Lane. But I think, I want Bijan Robinson. I'm very happy with Paris Johnson.
So pick is in. Is that what you're telling me?
It's already been in. I already explained it.
All right.
It works out perfectly, too, because the report came out today that that's who the Eagles, they could possibly move up for that selection. So, I mean, there you go. They got it to work out perfectly for them.
The report also came out that they're, legitimately serious about maybe Bijan at 10. So, I'm very fascinated to see what happens with the Eagles' first pick.
Yeah, for sure. Let's do a quick little speed through on some of these last or some of these other ones to kind of catch up a little bit. So the Tennessee Titans are on the clock now, and there's a lot of ways that they certainly could have gone with this. Unfortunately, due to the fact that the quarterbacks are off the board now, this might be a situation where maybe they trade back or they kind of stay put. But you're kind of in the mold of recouping assets, and especially with the offensive line and with the loss certainly of Taylor Lewan, they can certainly bolster this offensive line. I also feel like, this has been certainly a really popular selection for the New York Jets, but the way that's this particular offensive lineman is in his versatility is also something that kind of screams to me, this is like a Titan selection through and through. And that would mean that Peter Skoronski of Northwestern is headed to Tennessee, and the country state, should I say, with Tennessee. So Peter Skoronski is headed to Tennessee. So it's going to be a lot of fun to see Skoronski there. With Tennessee, you can kind of see him grow. So that puts the Houston Texans on the clock. So they already had the pick number 2. Now this is, this puts them back on the clock. What are we going on this one?
So the reports out have been that they've gotten no action at 2 to move down, but there is scuttlebutt that they may try to package something with this pick and move up. Being very interesting to see what they do with that. John Mechie, congrats to him. He was able to participate today in the voluntary practice, first practice back from his leukemia diagnosis. So props to him. Looking at the rest of their wide receiver core, though, Robert Woods, Nico Collins, Noah Brown. Hey, props to Noah Brown for showing out when he could, but that's nothing really to write home about. They just drafted Bryce Young in this scenario. They need to surround him with talent. They brought in Dalton Schultz. Good on them. Their running game's a little all right. Laramie Tunsil's still there. I think they need another wide receiver there. And so we're going with Jackson Smith and Jigba. Did I pronounce his last name right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, you nailed it.
Perfect.
Love that pick.
Okay. Ohio State, known for churning out wide receiver talent, just like Alabama of late. Brian Hartline is one of the best in the business at developing wide receivers. He doesn't just get talent; he develops the talent, and he may be as talented as any of those guys that they've had. We're talking about Olave. We're talking about Wilson coming through the program recently, and he's every bit as talented as those guys. Now, Marvin Harrison's son, definitely is going to make a name for himself, potentially, putting a shadow on his dad. But Jackson Smith and Jigba, perfect target. They're going to be able to put him right in the middle. Good security blanket running out of the slot. Very sure hands, very physical, willing receiver to go over the middle. Very good in the run game too. Very well-rounded wide receiver. I think he's the perfect guy to put in with Bryce Young in that offense.
Beautiful. So then at pick 13 for the Packers, they're running to the board again. This is a guy I really don't. It's weird because I don't think he'll be here, but I don't hate any of the picks we've made so far, so I'm not sure who's going to be the guy who gets taken over. But Christian Gonzalez is one of those prototype types of corners. He's got that long, lengthy 6'2" build. He moves like a gazelle. He's like 4.4 speed. He's absolutely ridiculous. So he's the type of player you combine him with Jair Alexander, who might be playing nickel or on the outside, see what you can still get left in Rasul Douglas. But that's a way to kind of start rebuilding the secondary a little bit and making some moves. So I think that would be an absolutely beautiful pick out there in Green Bay. I think Green Bay would be rejoicing after losing Aaron Rodgers and having an absolutely superstar secondary they can start to look forward to. So that's the pick.
That puts the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick on the clock. This has been kind of also another talked about place that if a quarterback were to drop, a sneaky place for them to go quarterback.
It could, but it's not happening in this scenario. The Patriots, they just make interesting picks pretty much every year, and they also seem to love taking tackles very frequently, and I honestly have them doing the same thing again this year. Look, they have Trent Brown on the offensive line, who's going to be a free agent after this season. They're starting 34-year-old Riley Reif. Whatever the quarterback ends up being there, they need more protection. Like, that's just straight up, they need more protection. And Darnell Wright from Tennessee fell to them here at 14. They took Cole Strange last year as like kind of the head scratcher pick, but who knows, what's going to happen there. He's still only 1 year into his career. Can't really hurt to take more swings at tackle. So I'm having them take Darnell Wright.
Yeah, so that will put the New York Jets on the clock. So anybody that has noticed, this has been updated with the trade of the Aaron Rodgers trade. So the Green Bay Packers and the Jets pick have been flipped. Obviously, I'm sure we all noticed that. Now that means that the Jets are on the clock. I feel like, it's a little bit of some slim pickings, if you will, for the offensive line and where things are going at right now. So they can certainly go out and make the draft of Broderick Jones, or they can also kind of continue to bolster up that defensive line and have it be, should I say, like almost like a win now move, if you will, in kind of getting this kind of player. But if you give this kind of player to like a Robert Saleh, I'd almost be really curious to know like what he's going to end up doing with a Robert Saleh. And what I'm trying to say is that Nolan Smith, that freaky athletic, edge from Georgia, is going to the Jets. Because again, like there's been so much talk about, of the Jets going offensive line. But I mean, yeah, I think in kind of like a wild card here, they went with Nolan Smith instead of the tackle. So that will put the Washington Commanders on the clock.
Yeah, so they've got some holes for sure. Could use a tight end, could use an offensive tackle, could use a quarterback, but there's no real value there. One guy they can add who could be an impact player is Deontay Banks, cornerback out of Maryland. Super fast, runs a 4.3 40. Is in like the 98th percentile. Yep. 98th percentile in burst and 97th in agility. Ronald Darby, Broncos legend, is his player comp. And honestly, if he's healthy, like that's the prototype for a top 10 type of cornerback in the league. Ron Rivera, Jack Del Rio, very prominent names in the organization. I think they probably go defense again. They certainly aren't afraid to go defense with their first pick. So Banks is the pick here, getting away from the front seven as they traditionally do and investing in their back part of the defense.
That means that the Pittsburgh Steelers are on the clock, and they are certainly were planning to address the defense, but it may not be the selection that everybody was certainly hoping as far as maybe a homecoming in Pittsburgh.
Definitely, possibly, but I think it's one that they're still going to be very excited about. I think you get a player that they're going with Miles Murphy here. I think they need to add another piece across from the edge to play across from T.J. Watt. You know, right now they've got a Alex Highsmith, who I don't mind too much. They've got a Mike Goulet, but they don't really have that true difference maker to play opposite of their Defensive Player of the Year candidate year in and year out. I think that's the type of guy that they're getting here when they're adding a player like Miles Murphy. So that's the selection they're making. I think Mike Tomlin's making another pretty solid selection here. Just a very good high floor player, high character guy that I think he can develop well.
That means that the Detroit Lions are on the clock. And this was kind of a fun little situation because like the Philadelphia Eagles, it feels like the Detroit Lions and Philadelphia Eagles are in such a really good spot, especially the Lions, considering like where they were. And we touched on them earlier of where they are, where they finished, and to still have those 2 first-round picks. So, Brandon, where are we headed now with the Detroit Lions after their first selection?
So the Lions need some more help on the defense. Even after taking a cornerback with their first pick, they still need more help on the defense. Last year, they finished 30th against the run, 29th against the pass. We already established that we have a massive hole from Jeff Okudah. We filled that. This pick, they need an interior defensive lineman. And I talked about maybe trying to go that direction with the first pick, but I decided not to. Kalijah Cansey from Pitt is staring me in the face here at 18, and I love that for them. He's not as good against the run. I know I just said that they have struggles against the run, but I think he's someone you can develop there. He's a freaky athletic pass rusher, just along the defensive line in general. And even though Aiden Hutchinson has been a beast, they actually, between Aiden Hutchinson, James Houston, and Josh Pascal, broke the NFL record for most combined sacks by rookies last year, which is kind of insane. But they need more help on the interior of that line, give Aiden Hutchinson more of a break. I think they could build an insane defensive line if they grab Cansey here.
All right, so that means that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are on the clock, and it is the post-Tom Brady era. But they also lost a few corners in free agency, or they're still in free agency. So there's that opportunity that they can be able to bolster that secondary. And frankly, I would say this is almost like best case scenario for like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the sense of having a guy like this fall to them at pick 19. And, you know, that would be a corner that really kind of fits that new mold of corner in today's NFL, the 6'2" size corners with that ideal size, the playmaking. It's a little unfortunate that he couldn't have that reuniting in Pittsburgh, but Joey Porter is headed to the state of Florida where he will play with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that will put the Seattle Seahawks on the clock, and they've kind of had a few weird selections over the years, but it's kind of worked out. I mean, everybody kind of thought that the Jordan Brooks pick was weird, but hey, it kind of turned out pretty well for them as far as him being a tackling machine. Abraham Lucas and the other tackle that they were able to
Charles
take.
Cross.
Charles Cross. That certainly seemed to work out well for them. Tariq Woolen worked out for them last year. So, Maddie, where are we going with this Seattle selection here at pick 20?
So they took Will Anderson, one of the best players on the defensive line, whether he's edge, whether he's going to be an end, whatever they decide to play him. Here they get one of the best players on the offensive line. They're going to go take Osiris Torrance, inside offensive lineman out of Florida, followed Billy Napier from the Raging Cajuns over to the Florida Gators. He was a first-team All-American, went his whole career without allowing a sack, which is really important when you're trying to protect your investment and the big money that they just gave Geno Smith, and allowing that offense to hum. So potentially, it's kind of ironic. They're putting all this stock into the offensive line now, and Russell Wilson didn't always have that luxury in Seattle. But I guess they're learning from their mistakes, and so they're really investing there and following up, using another first-round pick, addressing their interior offensive line with O'Cyrus Torrance.
Yeah,
That puts the Chargers on the clock there, Frankie. And there's been a lot of speculation they want to go wide receiver, but I feel like a certain tackle has kind of fell into their lap right now.
Oh, yeah. And it seems like he's kind of the forgotten man in this class too, Broderick Jones out of Georgia. Every year Georgia tackles are solid. Most of the time, a guy that's started in the SEC that has tape like he has, he's been able to be a multi-year player like Broderick has. They end up being pretty good NFL players. He's no exception to that. They already drafted a Georgia tackle that worked out pretty well for them last year. So I think Broderick Jones is the pick here. It's another great selection to try to help Justin Fields. They're going to be having hopefully similar. Well, hopefully they're maybe
Justin
not if you're
Fields.
Broncos fans, but I'm sorry, Justin Herbert. But with having Kellen Moore, they'll have the opportunity to hopefully throw some more deep passes, and you're going to need your tackles to hold up on that end. So bringing a guy like Broderick Jones, who we can get to work right away and hoping to keep Justin Herbert upright. Oh, I almost did it again before he needs that big contract extension. So that's the pick right there. I think it's a great one for him.
Justin Herbert.
I'm screaming into a pillow.
Justin Herbert, Justin Fields, they all sound the same. It's
same,
the Justin.
They're basically the same player, right? They play the same.
Yeah.
Same, but different.
That puts the Baltimore Ravens and Ozzie Newsome on the clock. Where's we going on this one?
The Ravens are just that team that they just look to sit there at the end of the first round and steal people that shouldn't fall to them, and they're doing it again. They're going to go with a incredibly versatile defensive back from Alabama by the name of Brian Branch.
Brian
Branch played star for the Crimson Tide in 2022, and he kind of did a little bit of everything. He was kind of a hybrid safety defensive back. He played, and over his last 3 seasons, he's played at least 65% of his snaps in the slot, and he kind of did everything from like trying to cover tight ends to helping against the run, and even covering wide receivers out wide. So this guy is just a chess piece, and put him in that secondary with Kyle Hamilton, and holy shit. The Ravens, dude, they just get people they shouldn't get. But
if you're thinking of a safety room in the future, Brian Branch and Kyle Hamilton, that's a crazy safety, tandem that you drafted in back-to-back years. That's chef's kiss right there with what they were. Yeah. So Baltimore is off the clock, meaning that the Minnesota Vikings are on the clock, and another place where you kind of maybe thought maybe they go wide receiver. Baltimore, obviously, with the investment of what they had with Odell Beckham Jr., they could have gone with a wide receiver here. Well, they also need some cornerback help, and in particular the other best cornerback available at this particular point is Kelly Ringo, the guy from Georgia. Another Georgia player has now strolled right in and is a first-round pick. Not to mention, I feel like the name Keely Ringo also feels like a Vikings name and selection too. Like just the way that it feels.
Sounds a little Scandinavian. I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Kelly Ringo is headed to the Skull Vikings. And after that will put the Jacksonville Jaguars on the clock. And this is actually kind of a fun pick because typically over the years, you kind of thought that they would be a little bit higher in the draft. And for the first time in what seems like a decade, they're not on the, they are not in the top 10. They are in the back end of the 20s or the start of the 20s. So, Maddie, where are we going on this one?
Edge and offensive tackle are definitely needs for them, but sometimes you have to just keep building on strengths, and their offense is what allowed them to get back in that game in the playoffs and really allow their franchise player in Trevor Lawrence to do work. One of the guys that has been a force multiplier for them has been Evan Ingram and his ability to stress defenses. Evan Ingram was given the franchise tag and doesn't have a long-term deal in place and actually is holding out from all the voluntary workouts and yada, yada, right? Enter Dalton Kincaid, uber productive tight end out of Utah, back-to-back 8-touchdown seasons. Very versatile player, not the best in run blocking, but you're not using a first-round pick on a tight end to be a run blocker. You're using that pick for them to be a defensive maker catching the football. They say the two best friends of a young quarterback are a strong running game and a reliable tight end. He isn't going to help so much in the run game. That's what his boy Etienne is for. But he's certainly going to make safeties consider whether or not they should sell out against the run or they should hold tight up the seam. Very big-bodied guy, going to help unlock a lot for them. Dalton Kincaid's kind of a luxury pick, but with all the talent that they have on that offense, he could be the final piece, even if Evan Ingram decides to hold out.
A tight end with Cade in his name, not Mr. Boggins, is freaking out.
Yeah, I mean, because we all know that Cade Otton is not a Hall of Fame tight end right now. Like, so just, I'm just throwing that out there. All right, so that means that the New York Giants are on the clock, and there's some different ways that they can certainly go. So what are we feeling here?
So for the Giants, they need an X receiver, guys. They need someone to go be that big body on the outside. I like some of the moves they've made. I don't necessarily love the Danny Jones contract, but you've already gotten him to sign it. It's too late to go back on your word. So right now we're going in and getting him as outside receiver of the future. We're getting Quentin Johnston, not necessarily my favorite prospect when you look at like the type of receiver they need in that room. When you look at the potential that he could become, I think he makes the most sense there. He's a bigger bodied guy, literally that X prototype, but he doesn't necessarily play to the size all the time. Doesn't fight for catches necessarily as well as he can, but he's a little bit better of a rack option than I think a lot of people expect. So he's a pick that I think will fit in well in New York. And I think, he fills a need for them. And I think he will work out well. And I think he's a fine selection to take at 25 too, when you're kind of running out of those surefire picks,
All right. So that means
Cam's boy right there. Cam loves him some Quentin.
He's a beast.
Not necessarily. I mean, he's a great wide receiver, but I will say I probably like some of the other wide receivers just a little bit better. But he's a great wide receiver. I mean, I will say I don't know if he will achieve the comparison, but I've seen this as far as a popular comparison, that being Demaryius Thomas. I don't know if he will achieve that, but I can understand some of the hype as far as some of the comparisons are surrounding, like, a Quentin Johnson and a Demaryius Thomas, like at the point of where they were in their career heading into the NFL.
Real quick, I got to say I'm not here for the Baker Mayfield slander. That is all. Baker Mayfield, the GOAT. Never forget it.
Maddie will never forget the planting of the flag that took place. So that means that the Dallas Cowboys are on the clock, and this one
was tough. This one was tough for me. I literally texted a buddy of mine who's a huge Cowboys fan. I was like, "Hey, what are you leaning with your first round pick this year?" He's like, "I have no idea." So, I'm gonna shake things up a little bit here. And even though they lost Kellen Moore last year, Kellen Moore's offense in Dallas targeted tight ends on 23.4% of their passes, which is insane. And they also lost Dalton Schultz this offseason, who was by far their top target as a tight end on that offense. And their two remaining tight ends behind Schultz have 30 combined career receptions. So they definitely need some more talent in that room. And obviously there were kind of some shakeup at running back with Zeke, but they have a solid backup plan in place there already. So I'm going to have them taking a guy who broke all sorts of records for the Notre Dame in Michael Mayer. Michael Mayer, ironically, Zerline has his comparison as Jason Witten. He's just an incredibly consistent tight end who can actually makes an effort in the blocking of the running game, and isn't one of those guys that like he's only an athlete who's going to go catch the ball and that's it. He like is willing to try to block people, but he's also a great weapon in the pass game who can kind of fill a bit of that Dalton Schultz void, if you will. And, it remains to be seen if the offense is going to rely as heavily on tight ends this year, but they definitely need help there.
Okay. And so that will put the Buffalo Bills on the clock. Another one of those teams, like, you really don't necessarily see any needs. You don't really see a team that, can really feel like they can really do no wrong, if you will. And I think this is a case where they can even go on the interior. And it was kind of like flipping, back and forth of where they wanted to go. It was interior or where was, it was a lot of ways they can certainly go. And so they're going to keep the theme, and actually they're going to draft a player that he had a lot going on the last few years. He had a kidney infection. He had the death of his sister, if I'm not mistaken. And he really is a great player. And so he's had a lot of personal stuff certainly happen to him. But you turn the tape on, and what he had a couple of years back was just an absolute dominant player at the University of Clemson, and that is Brian Breezy from Clemson. So you add him to the mix with a guy like an Ed Oliver, a Gregory Rousseau, that entire defensive line, that entire defensive front. That's a nice little fit, for where Brian Breezy could go, and that will put the Cincinnati Bengals on the clock.
Gone is Samaje Perine. He plays for the Broncos now. Joe Mixon just seems to always get himself in trouble. Running back is going to be a very important position to be able to help keep Burrow healthy, be able to open things up offensively. Potentially, you could argue that Bijan is the running back one, and that's fine, but certainly not far behind him. Jahmyr Gibbs, potentially in that Alvin Kamara mold, do-it-all guy. It's going to be perfect for them. It's such a perfect fit. They're not going to get another player at 28 that's going to impact their football team more than what Gibbs can. They are in a win-now mode, especially after tasting success recently. Like, it just makes too much sense. If he's on the clock or available at 28, he doesn't get to 29. So Bengals, Jahmyr Gibbs, running back, Alabama, book it.
All right. And so that will put the New Orleans Saints, who this was originally the pick for the Denver Broncos, but they decided to trade it away and make the right decision. Yes, I said right decision. And acquiring Sean Payton as their head coach, because head coach is way more important than than like actual first pick selections, like just draft picks. Head coach greater than draft picks. So that puts the New Orleans Saints on the clock.
So I think this pick makes a ton of sense talent-wise. It makes a ton of sense for the team. It really just all around, it's a beautiful selection. This Saints team has for years loved to get these huge, massive bodies to play on the outside for them. They've always liked to get, I think, a little bit of the younger guys that they can kind of develop. If they had the opportunity to move up for this guy, I think that they would totally do it. Lost defensive line coach this year to the Falcons. They lost a couple outside pieces like Marcus Davenport. So this year they're going to go get Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa. Absolute freak athlete who had an incredible season this year. Him getting to play next to Cam Jordan and kind of learn the game from a legend like that is just so perfect. Such a young piece for them to develop on the outside, and really a piece that they can use flexibility across that entire defense. Just kind of keeps a lot of defense or offenses guessing based on all the pieces that they have and the versatility they all possess. So I think that's a home run selection for the Saints. And I think Saints fans would be absolutely ecstatic with the type of player that he can be molded into. And he's still so young.
He's another player that I think you could even see go to Buffalo. Like, so for sure. And in fact,
he's probably one of the,
no, go ahead.
He's probably one of the hardest players I feel like to project necessarily where he's going to go, because he is a little bit of a projection. He's a little bit raw, but he is just such a fluid athlete, has that versatility to play so many positions. And I mean, when you have a guy who's 20 years old, who's as big as he is at like 6'6", 275, those are usually very good NFL players. When you talk about a guy like him possibly falling to the late first, like it just feels like a no-brainer, and playing at Iowa too, which has just been kind of like a stud NFL player factory, it feels like, on both sides of the ball.
We talked about
his nickname is Hercules, just to throw that out there.
We talked a little bit about it on on Sports Nonsense and Whiskey with Caleb, who is in the chat. And we kind of made the comparison, or I made the comparison that he reminded me a little bit of where a former Iowa player was, and that was AJ Epinesa. So like he was kind of like almost like completely kind of like undervalued, if you will. But like you turn the
I loved
tape on
Epinesa coming out.
yeah, and he was a great player, like dominant player. And so you put him, say like if he was to go to Buffalo or just in general, you put him in a really good situation where he can potentially groom. It's a solid pick. So the Super Bowl runner-up of the pick that is actually like their pick and not like via a trade or anything, they're on the clock, and I would imagine this is one more case, Brandon, where they're punching, they're punching a wall like Andy Bernard with the fact they probably could have had Jahmyr Gibbs. But considering, you were in the Super Bowl last year, you still have a running quarterback like Jalen Hurts for 5 more years. You're still, doing quite well. And let's also not forget, this is a running back class that is very, very deep.
Are you just going to take my pick over and just explain it for me then? God,
Nope.
Just kidding. I am once again Howie Roseman, and once again I am pissed off because Jahmyr Gibbs was my backup plan, and I watched him go 2 picks before me, and Lucas Van Ness was my other backup plan, and I watched him go 1 pick before me. So I am incredibly upset right now. I am inconsolable, and I don't know what to do. Literally, this was a very, very hard pick. In the end, I'm settling on a guy who is a freak athlete, super explosive player, who might be a little bit of a reach here, just slightly. But you know what? Howie Roseman loves his edge rushers, and I can't really blame him because they had 70 sacks last year, which was a franchise record. If you want to get after the pass rush, or if you want to have pass rush that's going to get after the quarterback, just look at the Eagles, because that's what they love to build and sustain. They want to keep that cupboard full, just like the offensive line. So instead of taking someone like Lucas Van Ness, who is what I wanted, I'm going to take a guy like Felix Anudike from Kansas State, because he is incredibly talented, incredibly athletic. He can be a bit more consistent as a player, but he has those flashes of just like wrecking people. And they have a very good edge room. I mean, it's not like necessarily a need. They have Hassan Reddick, who's a freak. They still have Josh Sweat. They have Derek Barnett, who's really good. They still have Brandon Graham, although, he is 35. I don't see him there for much longer. So just keep the cupboard stocked. Put in a guy like Felix in that room to learn from Sweat, Reddick, and Derek Barnett. That's just like, that's diamonds right there. Like, you're creating diamonds.
Love it.
All right, so that will put the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs on the clock. And, oh, by the way, this is pick 31 because this year there will be no pick 32 in the first round of the NFL draft. So the draft will end here at pick 31, then go to the next round, the second round. So the Kansas City Chiefs are on the clock, and there's a lot of speculation that they may want to go wide receiver here. They could even go Zay Flowers. And I think if you're probably talking a little bit of a disappointment, that's probably one of the disappointments of this mock draft is Zay Flowers did not go into the first round. I would, if you were to ask me, I would probably put Zay Flowers in the first round, but he is not in the first round in this draft. In fact, the Kansas City Chiefs will also bolster their roster with the going and getting, say, the sexy pick on the defensive side of the ball by getting a guy who, next to Kalijah Kancey, really had quite himself a day at the combine, and that was Adida Tamwa, Adibaware. I hope I pronounced it right, from Northwestern. Yeah, you might be. Are you muted, Frankie, or were you saying something?
Yeah, Adetamawa Adebare.
Adebare.
He goes by Tommy.
Adebare.
Apparently, he likes being called Tommy. I've read from a couple Northwestern reports. So
Tommy?
you just call him Tommy.
So the Kansas City Chiefs are drafting Tommy, and I guess you could say he's like a freak athlete, like Tommy Oliver.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, you're getting a guy that, if you put him on a defensive line with Chris Jones, Like that's actually a scary combination. Like that's almost like giving a defensive line almost like two Aaron Donalds, or or maybe two versions of a Chris Jones, if you will. Like, because that's the freaky thing about about a player like this, is that you could be able to put him in like those edge situations and defensive end situations, and you can mix and match either a Chris Jones or a Tommy or anything like that. And so I'm really curious to see if this is the selection for the Chiefs, where they go. So the Kansas City Chiefs will round up the draft by drafting Tommy from Northwestern. So that will conclude the 2023 NFL draft, ladies and gentlemen.
Slow clap, mini golf clap for the
mini golf clap.
The GM.
So to kind of round it all out, I know you have to dip here in a little bit here, Frankie, but so like to kind of close things out on all of the selections that have been made, is there a selection that when you kind of look at all the selections, maybe some of your favorite selections, maybe some that kind of like scratches your head a little bit when you kind of think about it?
Take a drink every time Cam says selection.
So, I mean, man, when you look at like how the quarterback class has kind of developed throughout this entire process, and with it really seeming like 3 of the top 5 picks are going to end up being quarterbacks, maybe 4. It's crazy the value teams like Seattle are going to get here, and teams like Detroit. I mean, they can either take arguably the best prospects in the class, the best defensive prospects, or there are going to be teams that I think might be looking to move up. I mean, there's been so many reports all week about the Texans possibly moving up. There was possibly about the Eagles possibly looking to move up for Paris Johnson. There are going to be teams that are going to want those high-end players that are dropping because there's just too many quarterbacks going early. So it's kind of crazy. As far as a little shocking, I thought Christian Gonzalez sliding to 13 was a little crazy, but it's something that can totally happen. Broderick Jones sliding all the way to 21. I mean, you talk about guys like Michael Mayer going to 26, but I mean, the tight end class this year is so interesting because it's so deep and so good, but it feels like, this isn't the first year that's happened, but really how many of them are really going to be productive on that rookie deal,
For sure. Maddie, Brandon?
So hearing these reports of like a lot of executives say they don't know which way this thing's going to go. This is perhaps one of the most topsy-turvy, uncertain drafts in a long time, maybe ever, for some of these people. I mean, anywhere from like somebody can go from 6 to 16, just depends on eye of the beholder. My question for you, Frankie, is what are you most certain about in this thing about uncertainty? Like one player to one team in one spot. If you had to like put $1,000 on it right now, what would it be?
One player to one team in one spot. I feel, man, I don't know. That's tough. I think Houston and Bryce Young make a ton of sense. I know there's a ton of juice right now for Bryce Young at 1, but I really think there's just a great opportunity. He ends up falling to 2 and ended up going to Houston. I think that just is kind of like such a match made in heaven when you really talk about maybe a team that kind of needs a little bit of like a guy who can play more of that improviser creator role, but also kind of work the over the middle stuff that they're going to want to be doing. I think he's exactly the type of player that they want to have with that. So I think that would be an awesome combination. The Michael Mayer going to Dallas is one that makes a ton of sense with them losing Dalton Schultz. I think you get the most pro-ready tight end. You get a guy who can really impact the game on every single level. Also a great over-the-middle target threat. And like you said, I mean, he's so comparable to guys they've had in the past. Like when you talk about Witten, he's a little bit comparable to Schultz, honestly. Like that's a pick that seems to make a ton of sense. And especially like Kincaid is my personal tight end 1. But for that pick specifically, like you said, where it's kind of the difference between some of these guys going 6 or end up going like 25, like he's just a better fit because he'll be better day one ready because he is that traditional inline. He can block. He can do everything you want him to do. So I think that one makes a ton of sense as well.
Both my picks. Just going to throw that out. Just kidding.
You got some fun GMs too. You got
hard.
to be Brad Holmes and you got to be Howie Roseman. So you got to be like the superstar GMs and you did it pretty successfully. Out, of course. It's got to stress him out.
But it was fun.
Philly fans are ruthless, man.
Yeah. Oh God, this is hard to say. Like this one is my favorite. Honestly, I think this is like kind of a cop out because it's so near the top. But CJ Stroud falling to the Colts is just like insane to me. Like I don't know if I'd say it's my
Irsay would be
favorite,
so happy.
but it's just like that team is ecstatic. Like, you give, God, I'm blanking on Shane Steichen. You give Shane Steichen someone like CJ Stroud, and suddenly the Colts can do something here. Like, they've been kind of in that purgatory, maybe not to Denver's extent, but they've been in that purgatory of the quarterback room. And I would be just super excited to see what he would do with that in this theoretical situation. Other than that, that's kind of my slight cop-out pick just because it's so high up. Someone like Brian Branch go into that secondary in Baltimore with Kyle Hamilton is just like,
you just want to talk about some of your own picks. I see. I see how it is.
It's really true though.
But for real though, Brian Branch.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Such versatile pieces in that secondary. Truly, like I think that would be absolutely awesome getting to see those two play together, and especially for the years coming forward. Like, who knows what they could end up doing together? You know, I think that's a very cool option.
I will say my bold take: the Broncos and the Dolphins will not select a pick in the first round. Hot take.
I mean,
Right
hey,
here.
Shut your mouth.
if it comes to fruition, you know, you deserve a shot. I gotta say, as far as some certain selections, I'm really curious about. You know, there's definitely a few certain selections, but you know, Kalijah Cansey to Detroit, Quentin Johnson to the New York Giants. Just the overall fit as far as with Brian Dable getting kind of like that physical receiver at that. And Jahmyr Gibbs to Cincinnati. Like, so that I think this is a case where they could have gone tight end, you know, because they lost Hayden Hurst, right? So they lost Hayden Hurst, so they easily could have gone tight end there. Like for instance,
sweating, man.
But yeah, you're right. But also, like, when you kind of boil it down and given the mix and news and the way things have been shaking out in the offseason, and potentially if they do move on from him, I'd be kind of sweating even if they didn't take Jahmyr Gibbs, because this is a running back class where they can easily find its replacement, you know, not just in this round, but, you know, in some upcoming rounds. And so, but like, for what I'm trying to say is, like, I could even see a situation where Darnell Washington slides into here, right? It's like a Darnell Washington slides to Cincinnati, and you know, and you got that tight end spot. I could even see, and we talked about it on Sports Nonsense and Whiskey, but like I could even see 18 to 20 being the Hendon Hooker slot, where you could see Hooker being slided into a situation like that. And especially considering the fact that Seattle has that second pick, they could go after that quarterback, because you know, who knows? Obviously Geno Smith signed that really long deal, but like, who knows? Like they actually could go out and draft that kind of quarterback, even though he is the first round plus the 5th-year option. And you know, so it is certainly out there, and it seems like that's been like a report like a day, you know, before the draft, that like that certainly seems to be some steam with that.
Final like question for the group. Last year we saw AJ Brown get traded from Tennessee to Philadelphia. Obviously, big time move. They gave him a big deal. They went on to the Super Bowl. There are several players: Budda Baker, DeAndre Hopkins, Derrick Henry, again of the Titans because they're tearing it down. Evan Ingram, who we talked about before, and then also Jacobs is holding out because he doesn't have his deal. Any of those 5 or any other big names that you see get traded tomorrow?
I still think it's entirely possible that Jerry Jeudy gets traded. I don't know. It's very weird. Like, so they have until the 2nd to pick up his 5th-year option, and it's just so odd to me that they haven't picked it up. And to me, that's it. I know they've come out and been like, "Hey, he's a core part of this roster going forward." Then you pick up his 5th-year option. Like, it's so weird to constantly say that and be like, "We're not really listening to trades for him anymore." But you have a 5th-year option on the table that you haven't picked up. You know, I can understand the argument, I guess, like, well, they still have time, you know, they aren't in any rush, but it's kind of like, okay, this is the week that they should do it. The draft is tomorrow. I feel like you should have your plans in place. To me, it sounds like they're still kind of waiting to hear if someone jumps up to that price, and I would not be shocked if one of these teams that has a young up and coming quarterback, like you take a team like Jacksonville, if Jacksonville didn't add a player like Calvin Ridley this year and they were still sitting at 24 and they were offering 24 to Denver, that's a team I could totally see doing it. And Denver wouldn't say no to that. And I'd personally be pretty upset and devastated, but like I know some of the fan base probably wouldn't be. So I think if I had to guess the superstar that I think is quite possibly getting traded, I think it's Judy, just because I think he matches that fit of who is a team going to try to get with a day one pick. I think that's the big part of it too. I don't know if Henry's still necessarily worth a day one pick. No offense to Derrick Henry. Just, he's older. He's a running back. You don't usually see those guys go for a first round pick still. AJ Brown was 27 and hadn't signed his deal yet, like you're saying. So a guy in that kind of mold that I think would make sense is a guy like Jerry, sadly. So that's probably my pick. How about you guys?
Again, like that's just kind of like the thing where I'm with you, Frankie. It's like put your money where your mouth is, basically. Like, for the way things are going, you talked about not trading Jerry Jeudy, or you talked about not trading Courtland Sutton. The proof is in the pudding. Like, if you don't want to, like, first, don't take the wide receiver in the draft, but also just immediately pick up the fifth-year option, especially when you saw like 5 or 6 different teams pick up or decline, should I say, the fifth-year option on some players. Like the Commanders decided not to pick up the fifth-year option for Chase Young today in a surprising move. So, I mean, yeah, and so I don't know. But I also understand it from the standpoint, even if, say, because this could go a lot of ways, right? This could go a lot of ways. Like, they still may believe in Jerry Jeudy and they still may, believe in Courtland Sutton, but it's like they also don't necessarily have to pick up his fifth-year option, and also like they don't have to trade a wide receiver. It's just one of those things like, they want to probably see how it's going like this year, and it's probably like a wait and see year to kind of see how things are shaping up. But because of that, you can't necessarily take out the possibility that they take a wide receiver, given
100%.
everything right.
No, and it's definitely a me personal thing. I've really disliked the tendency of the Broncos staff the past few years. And again, I know it's GM speak, it's all press conferences, whatever. I've really disliked their habit of they come out and they publicly proclaim how in love with these players they are, how they're part of the rebuild process. And then a few months later, they move that guy away. If they do it with Jerry Jeudy, it's like, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, it just feels like this team is running in place at a certain point. Like, okay, you have these guys you drafted. I'm not saying that they've shown that they're incredible players, but they're definitely talented and can be helpful to your team. That doesn't have a lot of things that they're spending big money on right now. I just can't understand why you'd be like, oh, let's trade Jerry Jeudy, who's still only 24 years old, which is something so many people forget too. He just turned 24 like last week. There are going to be guys drafted tomorrow that are older than Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy has been in the league for 3 seasons. Like, it is so absurd, especially when you talk about this team has had issues in the passing game for how many seasons now. To me, to be like, oh, let's push this rebuild even further back by moving one of our few developed pieces for a complete unknown in a draft pick. And that draft pick would probably just be used to try to save George Payton's job, because right now I think he's still on a little bit of a hot seat. And if that doesn't work, well, now you have a new GM who didn't even make that selection. So it's a slippery slope, man. I'd rather just see Denver pay the players that are actually good and try to build something instead of just constantly knocking over the sandcastle and trying to start from scratch.
Yeah. So to get your guys' take on this now, Frankie. Well, first off, are you going to be appearing on Let's Talk Broncos? And giving, say, like maybe your final prediction, or are we kind of like there maybe with your final prediction?
Oh, we're there. Next week we'll be giving our post stuff. I'll be live tweeting and all that stuff throughout. I'll be doing that on the Irish NFL account, my account, the LTB account. We'll be live tweeting and discussing all that stuff. We might do like a Spaces for the Broncos picks or something. But so
what I'm going to ask here. So for anybody that is listening, you're going to get some breaking news, if you will, that this is going to end up being Frankie, Brandon, and Maddie making their call. Like, they're going to shoot their own shot for who the Broncos will select, considering we are a day before the draft.
Okay. So I love it.
So if you guys are going to make shoot your shot of who will be Denver Broncos in this upcoming draft. And by the way, if you guys are listening, in the comments and commenting in the comment section. Please chime in who you guys think will be Denver Broncos in the comments. But let's start with you as a guest, Frankie. Shoot your own shot. In any round.
I'm torn between two. I got one on both sides of the ball that I'm a little stuck on. So I'll limit it to one because I don't want to steal Brandon's because I'm known for just always stealing Brandon's picks, I feel like.
Me too.
Do it, man.
I'm going to end up we're going the defensive side of the ball. I've been in love with this guy for multiple years now. I've talked about him many times on the LTV podcast. I've tweeted about him many times. Keanu Benton, if he ends up slipping into that 67-68 pick, would be an absolute dream for Denver. They're still very thin along that defensive line. It matches up great. I think he's probably gotten a great word put in from Matt Henningsen, who played with him last year. They were an absolute terror on that interior. That's a fun little word mix up. But just I think it would be an absolutely perfect selection for them. High productivity as both a run defender and as a pass rusher from the inside, primarily playing that 3-tech role. Denver does not have a need for like a pure defensive tackle this year. They've got those meatballs. You've got DJ Jones and you've got Mike Purcell who are able to play that like inside 0-1 role, whatever you may have it. So I think this year they need to go look and get a 3. And if I had to pick who I want to drop, and I think has a chance to be there. It's so weird because interior defensive line is kind of one of those positions that doesn't receive a lot of love. But if like Keanu Benton is a top 50 player in this class, maybe a little higher, just point blank. So the odds of him being there at 67 may not seem too likely. But as we saw from our mock with teams trading up and grabbing things like Will Levis with, a possible run of receivers happening. Once that starts to get a little shallow, you never know. So that would be my choice.
Sports on the interior, that just sounds like a horror movie that's waiting to be developed.
Sports Nonsense says Luke Musgrave.
Black Mirror episode.
Oh, that's a Black Mirror episode.
Brandon, what about you?
So he did not steal mine, actually. I feel like it's been fairly well expressed by me how I feel about the center position. So that's kind of an obvious one. I'm not going to go there. Instead, I'm going to say that we address the low-key semi-need at corner on this team, and I'm going to say Garrett Williams. Garrett Williams is a guy that has the athleticism to be a good outside cornerback, and we kind of need that a little bit. I mean, I like Damari Mathis. I think Damari Mathis has been a good corner and can continue to be a good corner and has the ability to develop into a great starter, obviously with Pat Surtain. But then behind him, Nasang Bassi, he's been kind of like, okay, I mean, I like him. He's good depth, but he hasn't really done anything crazy. Lamar Jackson, the corner. K1 Williams is not getting any younger. We kind of need a corner. And Garrett Williams, this secondary would be lit.
Okay, Garrett Williams, Maddie. I see you're pondering, you're thinking, and also this is your final shot, Maddie, to shoot your own shot for a guy that you've been clamoring the Broncos to draft basically since day one.
I don't feel great about the running back position still. P. Ryan, Sooner legend, got it. Good depth to have. And I'm a little distraught because the Avs are down 1-0 because they can't do anything on that side of the ice. Anyways, Tyjae Spears, a guy who can do a lot, a guy who dominated USC in their bowl game. You knew where the ball was going. They couldn't stop him. He's not necessarily like a home run hitter with like his 40 and all of that. He just does everything really well, got great burst. Going to be able to make a decision, put a foot in the ground and get upfield. Very willing and able in the passing game too. He's a guy that I think would fit well in the room. We need depth there. And I honestly wouldn't feel bad about him being RB1 even week 1 if Javonte isn't quite ready to go. That's a guy I want. I've been beating the drum for him for a while. He's not at the top of the running back chart as far as like a Bijan or even Bijan's teammate Roshan. Like there are other guys that are going to be drafted ahead of him. I get it, but man, Tyjae Spears, if if we get him in like late day 2, early day 3, which I'm thinking he's probably going to be a 3rd or a 4th rounder, perfect value, great spot.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a lot of places that I think the Broncos can certainly go. One thing I will say, you know, I'm a little unsure, and you know, as far as what position they're going to go with, and it's been a little bit, you know, and even adding, and that would be the tight end position. You know, so I'm going to call my shot on a different player, one that, you know, because I've been going with running back position or even wide receiver kind of typically. So I will actually say the tight end position. And I will actually go to the school that is actually been talked a little bit about, should I say, about a particular quarterback, meaning Aiden O'Connell. And I'm going to say Payne Durham will be a Bronco. Pick. Payne Durham will be a Bronco at the end of the NFL draft. I kind of like him. Like I don't think he's getting a lot of publicity, but I feel like he's one of those guys that's, you know, he's a nice little balanced tight end that he's got enough to work with. But yeah, that is going to do it, ladies and gentlemen, for another episode of the Manely Broncos podcast. Again, we want to say thank you guys so much for enjoying the Manely Broncos podcast, for sticking with us through the entire draft process, and you know, and really just making the Manely Broncos a part of your guys' daily routine. So thank you guys so much, and didn't get a chance to certainly say it at the top, but just again, a friendly reminder that if you guys are trying to watch the stream, and this just goes for not just Manely Broncos podcast, but any other shows on the MHRT network, if you are chiming on Twitter, those comments do not show up, unfortunately, on the YouTube channel. So you guys are going to have to go to the MHRT network channel, subscribe first, and then make sure you chime in on the comments. We certainly love it. We certainly appreciate you guys. Make sure you go check out Frankie at Frankie's Film, and the work that he does over with NFL Irish and the Let's Talk Broncos podcast, another fantastic Denver Broncos podcast. So thank you guys so much for hopping on. Follow Brandon at Brandon Miller PO. Follow Maddie at Maddie Moles Pod. Let's go Broncos, and let's go Avalanche. They are tied right now. It appears 1-1.
Rantanen deflection with McKinnon scoring. So
there we go.
Let's go.
So anyway, again, let's go Broncos and let's go Avalanche. We will see you guys at the very end and recap what just happened in the NFL draft, the undrafted free agents, the actual free agents maybe, or just the actual draft picks that the Broncos do select in the NFL draft. So thank you guys for tuning in for another episode of the Manely Broncos podcast.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go.